Welcome to the National Council on Interpreting for Healthcare's monthly podcast, sponsored by the Standards and Training Committee. The podcast is intended for you, our members, the public at large, and everyone working to promote language access and social justice. Join our conversations with some of the best in our field and hear what they have to say about interpreting for healthcare. Today's guest is Mireya Perez. Mireya Perez began her career as a certified medical interpreter and has since gained over a decade of experience breaking down language barriers in healthcare and education. After honing her skills as a medical interpreter in both General and Children's Hospital, Mireya spent nearly a decade as a staff interpreter in a K-12 public education school district, where she championed the vital role of trained interpreters in education. Today, Mireya is the proud creator and host of the Brand the Interpreter podcast. I'm going to ad-lib here and say that this podcast is single-handedly making a huge digital footprint for our profession. I'm very excited about it. And the podcast is the place where Mireya shares the stories and perspectives of language professionals from around the world. With a master's degree in communications and a passion for topics like creativity, personal branding, and strategic communication management within the interpreting industry, Mireya is committed to continue elevating the voices and stories of language professionals worldwide. My name is Yulia Spirov, and I'm with NCHC Standards and Training Committee. Welcome, Mireya.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. I am so excited to have this conversation with you. The tables have turned.
Yeah, it's so weird.
I was a guest on your podcast today. You're our guest.
Wow.
Welcome. All right. So as you know, all of our podcast episodes ask the same three questions of all guests, loosely based on Dickens' Christmas Carol. So let me ask you the very first question. Looking back at your amazing, illustrious career, what are you most proud of?
Well, from my past, I would definitely say not falling victim for too long of the imposter syndrome. I think that had I stayed in that mentality, a lot of the things that are now created and are evolving and are just making its way through the different pockets of community interpreters, I don't think would have existed had I believed all the negative thoughts, right? of who do you think you are, and no, this won't work, type of thing that I'm sure many of us encounter on and off, right, during our career.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned this, Mireya, because just recently I was talking to somebody who's a big fan of yours, and we were talking about your podcast and actually one of my episodes. And apparently you and I talked about the imposter syndrome, which I was in a bit of a trance. And they said like, hey, I was so glad to hear this, that I'm not alone. So many people feel this way. We don't talk about this enough. So I'm so glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, so many different levels too. I think at every stage, it always shows up, right? And so it's every moment of whenever there's a spark of inspiration or of passion towards something or an idea, right? For some reason, that just always comes to be that little, like almost like a fear moment of, yeah, questioning yourself. But I would definitely say that looking back, that's the most proud of as an individual, of being able to take a step forward in spite of the fear. You can't really say that you overcome it, because it just you learn to work with it. You learn to go hand in hand with the fear in spite of the fear, and doing some things that, especially if they inspire you, if they motivate you, if it's something that you're really passionate about. Definitely it's hard, but I think at the end of the day, you are proud of yourself for pushing past that. The most recent, of course, of my recent past would definitely be the podcast. that would be
As you should be.
profession. Yeah, professional wise, that definitely the podcast is that's just taken a completely different spin from what I initially thought of.
So, how did you get started with the podcast? How did you come up with an idea, and what gave you the courage to just get out there and start making episodes?
The courage was insanity, maybe. I think that I just felt like this spark of crazy. Just do it, even if I do feel like it's a crazy idea. And to be honest, Yulia, I think that the podcast was just a culmination of different things. I was in a moment in my professional career and with the organization that I was with, that I couldn't reach any high where I could reach, but I wasn't really going anywhere higher than that. Bureaucracy, politics, red tape, all kinds of different things, right? But I did feel this urge to sort of find a creative outlet, if you will, because I felt that there was, like, I had more to give to the profession. And so it just kept nagging. It just kept nagging at me. There's something else. There's something else. And the idea just, it was like a download, just, one day it just came to me, and it was like a question is really how I heard it. Like, why not a podcast? That's all I heard. That's all I heard in my mind. And I was like, again, like I said, insanity, because if people saw me at that day, I was probably talking to myself like, why not a podcast? Like, yeah, why not a podcast? Right. Yeah. So, and it's funny because, when you start any new business endeavor, the first thing that you potentially might find after doing some research, you might find that the recommendation is go out there and look at your competition, and see what's out there, see what's already been created, and all that stuff, so that you kind of get a bearing for what you're jumping into and what's already out there in terms of quote unquote competition. I did not want to do that. I did not want to know if there was already another podcast out there, right? Like, I just said I'm going to do it, and if it works, great, and if not, I learned something new, which was how to start a podcast. So I think that was really, I mean, there was so many reasons that I'd probably go past our time limit here, but I think knowing that it was just an intersection of all kinds of different, it was interest, it was passion, it was curiosity, it was creativity, it was my desire to give more in the profession, all those things put together. And I think, I don't know, I think that's why the podcast, has taken off the way it has, because there's definitely a lot of components to it, and everything from the heart.
Wow, well, I'm so glad you listened to that voice.
Me
I
too.
don't know whose voice it was, but the
Me
voice
too.
that asked you, why not a podcast?
Why not a podcast?
So,
Yes.
do you remember off of the top of your head how many episodes you've had so far?
Wow. It's funny you asked that, because in the beginning, when you're first starting, you're kind of wanting, I always knew that I wanted to interview, but you're kind of wanting to see what your format is going to be, what's going to land well with your audience. At least, that was my intention, was always gauging what was landing well with the audience or the listeners. So I always knew I wanted to interview, but there was always also moments of solo episodes, to see if there was things that I wanted to share on a solo basis. So in combination with the two, there's over 100 episodes already on the podcast. However, I just recently went back and started, renumbering the episodes, creating solos as special episodes, because I want to celebrate my 100th interview. And so that's coming around the corner. And so thinking that I'm about to interview my 100th guest, for me, is a major milestone on the podcast.
That is quite a milestone. I
Yeah.
had no idea. I've just kind of been following you and, listening to the episodes as they come out, but I had no idea. We have quite a lot of catching up to do, but this is not a competition.
Not at all. Not at
But
all.
yeah, that's amazing, Mireya. Congratulations. Will
Thank
there be
you.
fireworks going off in the background as your
Oh, yeah,
100th
definitely.
guest?
Yeah. We're definitely doing some digital celebrations and stuff like that. I'm definitely planning a big deal, because it's, for me at least, definitely a big deal.
Well,
Yeah.
amazing. I am very much looking forward to seeing that. And speaking of looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest challenge right now?
Yeah, that the biggest challenge I feel when I look at the years in the profession, for my experience in community interpreting, but particularly in educational interpreting, I've found that the conversations that evolve around language access are very divided in sectors, and based on experience when I was working with organizations, with the educational setting, and still currently, because I do go out and train with school districts, that there is a lot of crossover between all the different specialties. The talks about even just the professionalization of the role, right, down to systems and procedures for working with interpreters and developing processes of requests. All those things just was a crossover with education, that not everything perhaps might be relatable, but there was more things that were similar and that were relatable than not. So a lot of the stuff that I developed with the school district came from both medical settings and our sign language interpreter, standards of practice and their codes of ethics, and all the content that they've put out. That's what, in addition to the Office of Civil Rights, filings, but in combination, I think there was a great mix of crossover. And the challenge for me, going back to your question, is being able to have language access as a system as a whole, right? And a whole system, and then having, of course, like your specialty areas. In my mind, I envision that as let's say one of the national associations, and then they're divided by sectors, right, in the states or in different regions, right? But it's a division of the main association. And I don't see that currently for language access conversations. There's a lot of discussion on language access, but I don't see it as one whole and then divided into sectors. And I may be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. And if that is the case, I hope that someone will invite me and others from the different specializations, particularly those that are trying to professionalize, to the conversation, because that is definitely something that I feel that's missing.
Okay, sounds like quite the task. And I know there are conversations currently happening around educational interpretation and, standards of practice and potentially certification. So hopefully, as a result of this podcast, somebody will reach out to you and connect you with other efforts going on in this field, because it sounds like lots of people are interested and have good ideas, but sounds like there needs to be a bit of a more unified effort.
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, that's how I see it. Because again, going back to my personal experience, and perhaps my experience is similar to the experiences of many others that are trying to look at this particular topic within their organization. Now, there's a topic of training, right? There's the topic of systems, of request systems. I mean, there's a topic of, I don't know, translate. There's all sorts of topics, as you know, under the language access umbrella. But the conversation of language access itself and getting the right terminology, so that when people are speaking with their supervisors or administrators, they have the correct information that's coming out of their communication, right? Rather than trying to piece the ideas together on your own. It makes a huge difference and a big impact. And I speak out of experience by means, like I said earlier, of the different combination of information that I was able to get and then present it. It makes a big difference, especially when you're working on your own, trying to push forward language access in a big organization.
No one, teamwork makes the dream work.
That's
So
right.
hopefully you find some teammates.
That's right.
And then, you started out as a medical interpreter, and then you sort of transitioned into educational interpreting. And I don't know if you're still plugged into healthcare interpreting, perhaps through the work you do or through the podcast guests that you see, although I know you have a very kind of diverse group of interpreters from very different domains. But do you have a sense of some of the challenges that healthcare interpreting is now facing?
No, it's funny you ask, because there was a moment in which it was a complete disconnect by means of no longer working in that particular setting. However, being able to bring all the experiences that I did learn. And that was where I started for the beginning part of my professional interpreting career was doing medical appointments and when working with the hospitals. I am plugged in now by means of doing the continued professional development and being a part of any PD actually that I could join in terms of the medical setting. But I couldn't tell you the last time I walked into a healthcare appointment. I've had medical personnel or staff in the meetings and educational settings for some of the student related conversations, but it's not been something that I've been a part of in the last few years. But like
Gotcha.
you said, yeah, I mean, I stay abreast thanks to the conversations and the guests that come in and talk about the issues, in addition to going to conferences and professional development and listening to the information via that means.
Well, speaking of conferences, I just saw you at the Chia conference in San Diego, which was lovely to run into you. And what I really loved is that you came back from the conference and I saw you posting on LinkedIn, I think you said 5 things that I learned at a conference, and then you kind of summarized them. So that's really amazing. I think that everybody goes and learns a lot and has a good time, but you're actually bringing things back and sharing them. So, what were some of would you mind sharing with us once again, what were some of the things you learned at the conference that you took back? Because it was all about healthcare interpreting.
It was all about healthcare interpreting, but here we go again with the conversation about the crossover, right? Regardless of what specialization you're in. I did learn there was a course there, a workshop with, and I'm really bad with names. I'm going to forget her name now. But she spoke about language access in healthcare settings and the conversations that are taking place behind the scenes with language access. Romina, I just remembered. So Romina, yes, there are things that it's kind of like, whoa, I've never heard of that, right? That's a completely new topic. But again, it challenges you as the individual, as the professional, to look further into it. There's only so much you can get from a 1 hour workshop. But you get what you can. Language access it just happens to be a topic that I'm very interested in. And there was a workshop about that. And she shared different resources and I made a new connection. So that's also, very important. I walked into or was part of another workshop with Gabriela Sibak, which she happened to also just be a guest on the show. And I learned she was presenting about the simultaneous interpreting techniques. And she's an amazing instructor and professor. And she shared resources that I had not seen before, even though I did training in community interpreting and the different modes of interpreting. I have that background and I've taken PD, but she presented something completely new that I had not seen before, right? So all of those different things, I think that are just a fantastic way to continue improving. She shared about how to do deliberate practice, right? And what we can do in order to not just practice, but almost like a grading rubric and how to grade ourselves. That was intense. That I've never seen, even in my interpreting studies when I went through a college, they never showed that. So I thought that was beautiful. And, I definitely appreciated that. And then of course the training aspect, I went and I did, Daryl, like I can't remember it
Darren
now.
Reed?
Darren,
Are you
yes,
talking about Chia Interpreter of the Year, Darren Reed?
yes, Darren. I went into his workshop, and sorry, Darren, if you hear, like I didn't mean that. I'm really horrible with names. I know who you are though. Yes, I went to his workshop and he spoke about the how to be a trainer and just really delivered that topic with passion and I think that it sort of takes us back and makes us connect for those of us that are sharing uh training, whether it's formal or informal. I find that my social media is an informal way of training interpreters or soon to be interpreters, or even reminding those that are seasoned in the profession about some of the things and challenges that we encounter. I feel that that's an informal way of training other individuals. I get contacted on a daily basis almost by aspiring bilingual professionals that are, they were doing PhD in education, the most recent one, and their passion or their desire to be in the interpreting profession never left them, and they're pivoting in their careers, and they came across my content, and so it's like, oh, like I want to do that so much. And I feel that when you go to these conferences like this one, for example, in the Chia in San Diego, it was just like in reinvigorating for what I'm pushing out and the content that I do want to share with the new generation of language professionals, and season 2.
I love that. And I agree that your social media content, your Instagram reels can serve as a informal ways of education. The next time I'm teaching about modes of interpretation, I'm going to include your video on simultaneous interpreting. That was one of the best. And and it applies equally, right? Speaking of, you brought up things crossing over, right? It's applicable. Medical interpreters can laugh at it, educational interpreters and court interpreters, we can all laugh at it because we've all been there.
We've all been there, yeah, most
Exactly.
definitely.
So whether you're
And social
interpreting at a
media,
family conference or IUP session or
yeah, for sure. It doesn't matter. Yeah, the setting, like, I've really come to find out that social media can absolutely be utilized, in that way, if you so choose to put together content in a way that it's informing others of specific things, but that adds, it just adds some humor and some fun.
yeah.
Yeah, so very informal, but definitely fun for me to make. And by the looks of it, with the engagement of the following, it's fun for them as well.
Absolutely. And I love that so much because, on Instagram, you go into Reels and sometimes you fall into all of this niche. Sometimes they show you a very wide variety of Reels and seeing what sticks, right? And so you'll see, like, I don't know, problems that physical therapists have to deal with, or, like, imaging text problems. And these are the things that you have no idea about, right? What are their
Exactly.
daily challenges and successes? And so I love that there is now something about interpreting that somebody can just randomly stumble upon and be like, oh, so this is what, like, this is what it's like to be an interpreter, and, have somebody spring an assignment on you without letting you prepare. Or this is what it's like to be an interpreter, struggling through a long extended assignment with simultaneous interpretation. And hopefully
Yeah,
it will also go a long way towards us being called interpreters if we are interpreters, right? Versus
exactly. Yeah.
everybody being called a translator.
Yes, absolutely, especially that, yeah. And I no, I totally agree with you, Yulia. I think there's so many ways, so many different ways in which to reach different audiences. Yes, my followers are mainly the language professionals themselves, but that doesn't mean that with the social media algorithm, that's all that I'm getting. Excuse me, professionals from other areas, other specialty areas, and that are bilingual, but that would like to learn a thing or two. And so it just, yeah, the reach is endless, but my target audience is definitely the professionals that are in the field. And if I reach out to other professionals from other fields that want to know a little bit more about the interpreting profession, well, then even better.
Great. All right. Well, I have the last question of the podcast for you, and that is, looking forward, what would you love to see happen?
Looking forward, I have a very, very big dream that maybe one day in the interpreting profession we'll have a Grammys like type of event in which all specialty areas come together, and we've got like nominated interpreters of maybe different areas, but in which we can all commingle all those specialty: conference, medical, court, community interpreters, and we're all together as one, right? And one profession, and have like Grammy like awards for, and all of us supporting each other, one event
Is
like
there a red
that would
carpet
be
in your dream?
huge. Is there? Yes, there's a carpet and
Mhm.
pictures and and paparazzi like
They're like,
there's
oh,
all
that's
of
Mireya
that.
Perez. That's Mireya Perez. Mireya, what are you wearing?
No, I think I would be working behind the scenes on that event, like for sure. But I think that would be amazing. Like we go to the conferences for the different specialty areas, and there are always people receiving awards for that specific area, which is amazing in itself. Of course, that serves its own merit. But again, I go back to the crossover, right? And we can learn so much from one another, and would be so much more stronger in unity, and that type of number. I don't know if there would be a venue that would hold so many of us, but I think, perspective wise, we would come to realize how many of us are actually out there. And I know the language service providers have one big event for all of them, right?
Uh-huh.
For all language service providers, and they get awards. Why not interpreters?
Why not? I
Why
mean, I'm
not?
sure there is an arena or a stadium.
Exactly.
And can you just imagine, like, if you think of a big sporting event and, there are sports fans who chant, and then for us, all of us interpreters, we would like do a mass shadowing exercise.
Exactly.
Because I think all of us, simultaneous is one of the hardest skills to master, right? One of the reasons why Gabriela Sibak's class was so great for novices and seasoned interpreters alike, right? And so, yeah, we could do like a mass shadowing exercise. I don't know, do our
Sim-
pre-sessions.
Simultaneous competition.
Yes. Yeah, oh my goodness. Yes. Okay. I love it.
You see, I'm so
Mhm.
glad you're having the same vision, because yeah,
Yeah.
that's been definitely a thought. Like, why? It was one of those, why not?
Side
Right.
translation relay,
So
which I don't know how that would work, but that's,
that, yeah, those
something
are
to think.
the things we would work on in order, right? Like we would work on those things, but I think the dream itself would be, it would be amazing. I mean, why not like a gala like event for all interpreters
In
in
the
the field?
US. Yes.
Yes.
Any ideas on what the awards would be called? The
I don't know
Terpies?
yet. I
The
don't
Terpies?
know. I don't, we'd have to interpret.
The Terpies?
That's a
Yeah.
good one. Let's leave it to the audience and see what they come up with in terms of, some of those responses. What could we name the award that interpreters would win? And then it would be voted on by the interpreters themselves, right? So all the people that are there, and these are our nominees in the category of
Okay, and then do we have the screens?
the
And do we
screens,
all have
right?
to practice our graceful loser face where you go,
You still. Mhm.
like
Oh,
Joey from
nice.
Friends, where you go, well deserved.
I hope that your listeners are also envisioning the same thing. I think it's a big possibility that this could happen.
Yeah, well, if you don't know what I looked like, I encourage you to watch Friends and go back to the episode where Joey was nominated for a soapy, I think.
Soapy.
A soapy, yeah, for a soap opera he was on.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, Mireya, it has been amazing to chat with you, and you just inspired me with, the terpy idea. If it ever happens, I hope I get to see it. So thank you so much for coming and chatting with me
Thank
and
you.
sharing your passion for language access and for all things creative with our listeners.
Well,
And thank you to you, our listeners. Join us again next month as we discuss what's happening and how to improve interpreting for healthcare.